I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby here with Lily Rabe, who stars in two big shows this season, The First Lady and the 10th season of American Horror Story. But starting with First Lady, playing Lorena Hickok, who had a close relationship with Eleanor Roosevelt. I'm curious for like when you're going to play a real person, how does that process change for you from another fictional character?
There's this wonderful feeling of responsibility when you play anyone, but certainly more so when you're playing a real person, I think. And I've been lucky enough to be able to do that a few times, and I so enjoy it. I'm such a, I love the research process of what we do, and then with someone like Lorena Hickok, there's just um, such an incredible amount of wonderful material that to dive into. So I really enjoy that part of the process.
Yeah. Well, what were the kind of main takeaways just from your research that maybe wasn't even in the script that you sort of discovered in that process?
The thing that was sort of the most remarkable to me was that it was a relationship I had heard about. I'd heard of Hick. I knew about this relationship in a very vague way, but my sense before diving into the research and being cast in the role was that the relationship between them was sort of speculative. Of course, they'd had this close friendship, but that the sort of romantic element of their relationship was speculative. And what was so amazing is that this discovery, which it's anyone can discover it, it's there. It's an incredibly well documented relationship, and the romantic element of their relationship. There are the most some of the letters have been destroyed, but there are an abundance of letters that have not. They're some of the most romantic, gorgeous letters I've ever read. And and I'm a Shakespeare freak, so I wrote like that kind of prose. But these are jaw dropping. They're so beautiful and intimate, and so I think that was the biggest surprise for me, was just how incredibly well documented the relationship actually is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because she is so just drawn to Eleanor, I'm curious, what you think it was that created that spark between the two of them and why they had this kind of very intense devotion to each other.
I, you know, there are these brilliant, forward thinking women who I'm sure found a kind of, the incredible kindred spirit in the other woman. But also, I think the pace that these two women were marching at that time, they probably felt, I would think, partnered, to have someone kind of marching at a similar pace next to them, and to be able to kind of invisibly hold one another's hands through that time. And something that the show explores so beautifully is that kind of that sort of agreement that exists in Eleanor's marriage, and that unbelievable loneliness. And so this companionship just feels so singular and moving to me. But I think the word companion, in talking, when I would say, oh, yes, I'm playing Lorena Hickok, it was a lot of people had the same kind of sense that I did. Oh, they were sort of, she was her confidant and they were really close friends. But actually, I'm just so glad the show leans in the way it does, because it really is all there.
Yeah. Well, I do want to take a quick detour into just, finding Lorena, or I should say Hick, as you said, which was her nickname. I'm just wondering
It's a
about
great
like,
nickname.
It really is.
Yeah.
Just with finding the voice for this woman who, we're mostly seeing in the 30s, how do you develop like the particular kind of accent and that voice that you give to her?
I work with this wonderful man named Tom Jones. I met him when I was doing theater, but he works a lot in film as well. And um, he's someone now that I sort of, any chance I get, I like to work with him because he has such a holistic approach to voice work and to dialect work. So that was something that, because there isn't, it's not, she isn't someone who is recorded,
Right.
but just doing all the research I could on where she came from, where she then had spent time, and then of course in her profession, trying to lose bits of your accent to, so that isn't on people's minds when you're interviewing them. But I love immersing myself in that process, and certainly her voice, given the period, given her background, felt so specific and felt like such an important way in for me. So yeah, working with Tom was such a wonderful part of that journey.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I also do wonder about like the presentation of her and how much the way that you look actually helps you in your performance. Like we see a lot of browns, like, the blazer and sort of muted colors, and her hair is shorter. How much do those things kind of just help you to embody the character?
Sean Salin, the costume designer, is really one of the great costume designers I've ever worked with. I think one of the great costume designers working today. She's responsible for the coats of The Undoing. And
Iconic coats, yes.
yeah, but she is, and then she did the whole show. So it's like it's like doing three different shows. It's like doing these, vastly different time periods. And she's so well researched, but she also, what she then brings to the table is just so incredibly beautiful and thoughtful. And she's so collaborative. She's very close with Susanna. They work together a lot. So it feels like this wonderful triangle with the two of them early in the process, sort of diving in. And so much of what we wore was authentic and from the time period, or things were being, there were so many repairs being done and things were being copied exactly, and fabrics being found, so that you really could feel it on your skin. And I've never loved costumes more than the ones I got to wear as Hick, but that kind of just what you're saying, wearing these incredibly beautiful suits, and having that kind of, there's like a wonderful weight to the way that we chose to dress her, and that was a big part of playing her, certainly.
Yeah, and I think also just like your stance, even when you're sitting, there's just a confidence to her that I really took note of.
Thank you.
Well, of course, I have to ask about just working with Gillian Anderson as Eleanor, and how much you worked on this, again, very special connection that the two of them had. Just how is she to sort of bounce off of as an actress like that? I mean, she's doing a lot of transforming there too, but how do you work with each other?
Gillian is such a wonderful, wonderful person to build a relationship with, because she's like this investigator. She's someone, and I'm the same way. It's very, very hard for me to kind of pause in process, or I when you're making the thing, I just am always sort of asking, what more can we do? What more is, I don't want to miss anything. I don't want to feel like after we've it's gone off to the edit that something was missed. I just want to know that it was all there. And I will, I'm very good at not sleeping during shooting. And Gillian, it turns out, is similar in her inability to kind of ever switch off. She's up very, very late. She's, we're both sort of nocturnal creatures. So it was a wonderful thing to be able to sort of late at night get on the phone with her and just make sure that whatever it was we were doing the next day or the day after, if anything had changed based on that, there was just this, which is, it's all the things I would be doing by myself, but I got to do it with her, and because she was so available to that, and I think sort of similar in the way that she just doesn't stop, and she's she just creates such a safe space. I loved working with her so much.
Well, moving over to American Horror Story, you came back for 2 roles in this latest season,
Right.
double feature. And so in the first half, you're playing Doris, and she's very pregnant, and she goes with her family to stay in Provincetown, which ends up pretty much going bad for everyone involved. But how much did you sort of know ahead of time about the arc there of what you would be doing and eventually would have to be going through and sort of transforming into? Like, what did you know ahead of time?
Gosh, I did know that was going to happen.
Gotcha.
But there were things I didn't know. That's sort of a wonderful part of the free fall of doing that show, is that there's always a lot you don't know. But I did have sort of a footpath from the beginning for Doris and her relationship to her work and her talent for it or lack thereof, and her relationship with her daughter, her relationship with her husband, knowing ish what was going to happen. I did have, I was able to have some of those pieces in place at the beginning while we were sort of crafting who she was. But Doris is one of my favorite parts to play that I've played on Horror Story. And Gaslight was one of my favorite episodes to shoot. It was a rough one, but I really loved it, and I really I found it in a way maybe the scariest episode I've shot, because that idea, maybe the pale people aside, and the likelihood of running into them on the street in our day-to-day aside, I found the thrust of that episode, what it was really about, and the sort of terror of being gaslit by people that you trust, so harrowing and painful, because it's quite possible.
Yeah. Well, I certainly did feel for her through that entire arc. And I mean, you get to work pretty extensively with Finn Wittrock, and then Ryan Kira Armstrong is her daughter. And even though it's maybe not the healthiest dynamic in that family, I'm curious how much just the intensity of what she's going through in that situation sort of did stay with you even after they yelled cut, or if you could sort of like joke around with them after and you were able to maybe walk away a little bit.
It's such a great question. That episode was a hard one to walk away from. I mean, listen, I have children. I don't want to bring that home, and I think some of the wonderful, there's such a wonderful thing in the sort of immediacy of your child's day-to-day needs, or their way of playing and all of that. It's this wonderful meditation and sort of bringing you back to the present moment of your life outside of your work, for me anyway. But with that episode, it was a really hard one to shake, and I probably wasn't able to for a lot of it, because that kind of paranoia and that kind of lack of trust or betrayal, or saying to someone, but the sky is blue, I know the sky is blue. And they're like, what are you talking about? It's always been yellow. Or this idea that the ground beneath you can just suddenly go away, and that it's the people you've trusted so completely with your heart and your life, telling you that you're simply wrong. They're not saying you're crazy, they're just saying you're wrong. And that idea is so terrifying to me, that it did really get into my sort of into the core.
Wow. Well, going to the second half, you're playing another real life iconic figure with Amelia Earhart, who, funnily enough, had also been friends with Eleanor Roosevelt, from what I understand. But in this, I think it goes to some pretty wild places and delves into the kind of conspiracy around, why she disappeared and what happened there, how it might have to do with aliens. I'm curious just how much you read up on those kind of like conspiracies and the sort of myth around her disappearance before you got into the role.
I did, and also because these women, Hick and Eleanor Roosevelt and Amelia Earhart, are some of the most incredible. They're just so cool, and so I didn't. Once I was doing that dive into the Amelia Earhart research world, I really didn't want to stop because I just couldn't get enough of her. But she's so incredible and mesmerizing, and just herself at this time when it's sort of jaw-dropping that she was so completely and fully exactly who she was. And but I really did kind of fall in love with her doing that research. She's unbelievable.
Yeah, I wish we could have seen more from her personally, but we know the rules of American Horror Story. Anything can happen. But just in general,
can happen.
Like really, yeah,
really.
But
exactly.
returning to that world, again and again, as you've had, you've worked with a lot of the same people, even if you're in these very different locations, different situations. How much of the appeal of coming back to American Horror Story is just getting to work with those people? And I mean, just what are the elements that keep you coming back for more?
That's such a huge part of, and with the First Lady going, it was my second time working with
Susanna
Bier, and going back to work with Ryan over and over it's a huge, it's the reason to go back in so many ways. I get very excited about the parts that I'm playing, but really, Susanna or Ryan calling and saying, do you want to come back? And it's yes, because that when it works. And when you have that kind of shorthand with someone, when you have when you've gotten to that point of feeling creatively free, and there is that kind of wonderful environment of a community of sorts. It's something that I always want to go back to, because I think it leads to having a space to do, hopefully, your best work, because of that shorthand that you have. And I don't know if it's because I come from the theater, where that community feeling is such a part of it. And but I love the repeat. I love working with the same people over and over when it works. If it doesn't work, then no, I don't want to do it again. And that does happen too. But not only do I tend to say yes to that, but I like to seek it out. When you find when you work with someone like Jillian, or you work with it, it's a wonderful thing to then find those creatives. This happened with Susanna of what else can we do? And, you know, is there a play we could do together? Is there a this we could do together? I always really lean into that.
Well, for those of you watching, subscribe for more interviews and go to goldderby.com to make your Emmy predictions. Thank you so much, Lily, for your time.
Thank
It's
you
great
so
talking
much.
to you.
It was such a pleasure. Great to talk to you. Thank you so much.